When gold doubles, empires die. That's not a prophecy, it's arithmetic. And gold just did. Most people see that as a random market move. Oh, gold's doing well this year. But history doesn't see it that way. Every time hard money explodes against paper promises, it's never been good news for the empire issuing those promises. It's the market's final vote of no confidence. And if you know this rule, you know what's coming next. Because behind every shiny gold rally, there's a dying currency gasping for credibility. Behind every central banker's calm smile, there's a panic meeting no one talks about. And behind every soft landing headline, there's a fuse already burning under your savings, your retirement, your home. Look around. The U.S. dollar, the backbone of global trade for 80 years, has already lost over 15% of its reserve share since 2000. National debt, $37.4 trillion as of November 2025. That's $300,000 per American taxpayer. Interest payments alone will cost more this year than the entire U.S. military budget. And the government's solution? Print more, borrow more, pretend longer. Sound familiar? That's the exact same pattern that killed Rome, bankrupted Spain, and dethroned Britain. Different currencies, same sin. They all believed they could outsmart mathematics, that confidence could replace collateral. And every time, gold quietly doubled, and the empire followed. Here's the cruel part most people miss. When an empire falls, wealth doesn't disappear, it transfers. The question is, to whom? When Rome debased its silver coins, soldiers demanded gold and senators hoarded estates. When Spain's silver collapsed, creditors escaped with real assets, while citizens were left with copper dust. When Britain devalued the pound, the bankers who saw it coming doubled their gold holdings overnight. And when the dollar breaks, the same rule will apply, just digitized, global, and faster than ever before. But this isn't just another history lesson. It's the alarm clock. Because right now, while millions chase AI stocks and crypto bubbles, the real insiders, central banks, sovereign funds, the same institutions that designed the system, are buying gold at the fastest pace since World War II. They're not hedging. They're repositioning for the next regime. You can feel it, can't you? Groceries up, rent up, insurance up, everything costs more. But your paycheck doesn't. That's not inflation. That's institutional theft, the silent tax of debasement. The same trick empires have pulled for 2,000 years. So here's the uncomfortable truth. When gold doubles, it's not celebrating. It's warning. It's whispering that the system is breaking again, and this time, it's the last global empire on the clock. The countdown has started. The only question left is, will you hear the alarm, or sleep through the collapse? Every empire believes it's different. That's the first lie. They tell themselves, our economists are smarter, our systems are stronger, we can manage it. And yet, every empire runs the same con, the same beautiful illusion dressed up in academic jargon and PowerPoint charts. They call it monetary policy, but in plain English, it's dilution. It is taking a gallon of milk and pouring in water again and again while convincing you the flavor hasn't changed. That's all quantitative easing really is. Here's the hidden mechanism behind every collapse. When a government spends more than it earns, it faces two choices: cut spending or cheat. And they always choose to cheat. They print, they borrow, they invent new definitions of debt and inflation. Then they use psychology to keep you calm while they rob you blind. It works because of one thing: normalcy bias. Your brain is wired to assume that tomorrow will look like today. So when prices rise, you adapt instead of rebel. When your paycheck buys less, you shrug and budget harder. That's how silent collapses work, not through riots, but through quiet resignation. The Romans clipped coins and said it was for the glory of the empire. Spain flooded Europe with silver and called it a miracle of discovery. Britain printed during World War I and labeled it temporary wartime policy. And today, the US calls it stimulus and economic relief. Same playbook. different PR team. Here's where the illusion gets dangerous. They teach you that inflation is too target, manageable, predictable, boring. But 2% compounded over a lifetime wipes out half your wealth. That's not policy. That's theft wearing a suit. And every empire had its magicians today. We call them central bankers. They speak in riddles, transitory, soft landing, quantitative tightening. It's financial theater, a psychological smokescreen. Because if they spoke honestly, panic would set in overnight. Here's the brutal math. $1 today buys 84 cents worth of goods compared to 2019. The median American family now spends $709 more per month just to live the same life. And while households are drowning in credit card debt, over $1.4 trillion as of fall 2025, Wall Street cheers because consumer spending is strong. It's all smoke and mirrors. But history doesn't care about spin. It only cares about balance sheets. And the moment the numbers stop adding up, the illusion ends fast. That's the inflection point we're in now. Governments pretending to be solvent, markets pretending to believe them, and citizens pretending they have time. This is the moment, right before every crash in history, when people say, "It'll be fine." It always is. That's what the Romans said. That's what the Spaniards said. That's what the British said. And that's what Americans are saying right now. But the pattern never lies. The printing press is humming. Gold is rising. And faith, the only real foundation left, is cracking. So let's open the time capsule. Let's go back to where this pattern was first carved in stone. The first empire that thought it could outsmart math. Rome. Rome didn't fall in a day. It fell one coin at a time. When the empire began minting the denarius in 211 BC, it was nearly pure silver, about 95%. Solid, honest, trusted. That little coin built roads, armies, and monuments. It was the most reliable money the world had ever seen. For 3 centuries, Rome's economy thrived on that trust. But governments can never resist temptation. They always want a shortcut, a little more spending, a few more promises, a war too many. So they cheat, quietly, incrementally. By Emperor Nero's time around 60 AD, the silver content slipped to 90%. Under Trajan, 85%. Commodus, 70%. And by the Severan dynasty in the early 200s, it was half. The same silver melted into twice as many coins, twice as many promises. Half the truth. That's inflation before the word existed. To the average citizen, nothing looked wrong at first. The coins still gleamed. The eagle still shone. But underneath that silver wash was cheap copper, a lie you could rub off with your thumb. Psychologists call this herd behavior. As long as everyone keeps pretending, the illusion survives. Until it doesn't. By 250 AD, the denarius was less than 5% silver, basically a token. Soldiers, the backbone of the empire, refused it. They demanded gold or goods. And when the army loses faith in money, it loses faith in the empire. Prices exploded more than 1,000% in a few decades. Wheat, wine, rent, everything became unaffordable. The empire had to collect taxes in kind. Grain, livestock, labor. Trade collapsed. And between 235 and 285 AD, Rome cycled through 26 emperors, most of them assassinated by their own guards. That wasn't politics. That was economics detonating from within. Here's the terrifying rule that was born in that chaos. When the hard money doubles, the empire's days are numbered. Gold didn't rise, silver fell. Faith collapsed. And Rome's monetary chaos became political chaos. It's the same behavioral loop every empire runs. Overconfidence, where Rome will last forever. Denial, it's just temporary inflation. Panic, people hoard. Prices soar. Breakdown, money dies. Trust dies. Sound familiar? By the time Emperor Diocletian tried to fix it with price controls, it was too late. You can't legislate trust. The denarius was worthless. Rome's glory turned into barter. and the empire that ruled the world crumbled under the weight of its own lies. So they wrote the first chapter in humanity's oldest financial script, a playbook that every superpower since has copied word for word. Next came Spain, the richest empire the world had ever seen. And it would make the same mistake on an even grander scale. Spain should have been invincible. By the 1500s, they ruled the seas, conquered continents, and discovered what looked like a cheat code for wealth, a mountain of silver. Literally, at Potos, in what's now Bolivia, stood Cerro Rico, the rich hill. It was so loaded with silver that they said a mule could slip on money dust. Galleons carried hundreds of tons of bullion across the Atlantic every year. At its peak, over 200 tons of silver poured into Spain annually. No empire had ever been richer on paper, and that's exactly why it died. When you flood the world with money, even real silver money, without creating new goods or productivity, prices explode. Between 1500 and 1600, the cost of living in Spain quadrupled. Grain, rent, wool, everything soared. The historian Earl Hamilton called it the price revolution, the first great inflation of the modern world. But Spain didn't learn from Rome's sin, it perfected it. Wars in the Netherlands, in Italy, against the Ottomans, all on credit. King Philip II mortgaged the empire's future to fight the present. He pledged future silver shipments as collateral for loans that never stopped piling up. In just 50 years, Spain defaulted 4 times: 1557, 1575, 1596, and 1607. The richest nation on earth, bankrupt. How? Overconfidence bias. They believed the flow of silver would never end, that the mines, the conquests, the empire's image of strength would outlast the math. But math doesn't care about pride. When creditors lost faith, the king reached for the oldest trick, debasement. They began minting cheap copper coins called vel-en, pretending they were worth as much as silver. The market laughed. Gold and silver doubled in price against the new copper. Bread prices exploded. The middle-class merchants, artisans, wage earners was wiped out almost overnight. Meanwhile, the elites who owned land and gold survived just fine. The social fabric tore apart. Peasants abandoned fields. Trade dried up. Spain's ships, once packed with treasure, turned into ghost fleets. And the same inflation that made kings rich made their people poor. By the 1600s, a new power quietly rose: the Dutch Republic. They didn't have mountains of silver. They had trust, trade, and discipline. While Spain drowned in debt, the Dutch built banks. And eventually, the British would copy the Dutch, creating the Bank of England, the bond market, the modern financial empire. Spain's treasure had become its curse. Because wealth without production isn't wealth, it's decay dressed in luxury. Sound familiar? Today, America prints digital dollars the same way Spain minted copper vel-en. And just like then, the market already knows what's real and what's fake. So as Spain faded into history, the pattern marched east. This time, to a dynasty so advanced, it thought it could outsmart gold and silver entirely and replace metal with paper. Next stop, China. The first empire to invent fiat money and the first to regret it. 400 years before Europe would even dream of printing money, China was already doing it. The Ming Dynasty believed it had found the future, a way to replace heavy metal coins with the magic of paper. No more mining, no more minting, just print and prosper. They called it the Da Ming Baoqiao, the Great Ming Treasure Note. It was the world's first large-scale government-issued paper currency. On paper, it looked brilliant. Easier trade, smoother taxes, total control over money. What could go wrong? Everything. Because once you give rulers a printing press, restraint becomes a fairy tale. They printed for wars, palaces, and projects, without limit. The treasure notes weren't backed by gold or silver. Their value depended only on faith in officials, faith in promises. And as always, faith was the first thing to vanish. By the early 1400s, Those notes had lost over 99% of their value. Prices soared. Merchants refused paper altogether. The peasants demanded silver again. Real, heavy, reliable silver. The government's modern system collapsed in humiliation. But the story didn't end there. For a while, China recovered. Global silver from Japan, and later from Spain's colonies in the Americas, flowed into Asia. The empire rebuilt on that metallic foundation. Silver became money. Taxes were collected in it. Faith was restored. Until the silver stopped. In the early 1600s, Japan sealed its ports. Spanish fleets weakened. The flow of silver that fueled China's economy vanished almost overnight. And when supply shrank, value spiked. Silver's price didn't just double, it tripled, even quadrupled against the humble copper coins peasants used for daily life. Imagine earning your wage in copper, but paying your taxes in silver. It was impossible. Entire provinces went bankrupt. Families starved. Tax riots spread. Finally, in 1644, the Ming collapsed under the weight of its own monetary disaster, toppled by peasant rebellions led by Li Ziqing. The lesson? Even the smartest empire cannot paper over reality. You can't print trust. You can't decree value. When people lose faith in money, they lose faith in everything that money built. Sound familiar? Today, the US prints digital dollars instead of paper. We call it QE, liquidity, stimulus. But the physics are the same. More money chasing the same goods equals invisible tax on everyone holding cash. The Ming didn't have the internet, but we do. And yet, the illusion remains the same, that we can print wealth without pain, digitalize prosperity without production. It's not a new miracle. It's an old mistake with Wi-Fi. China wrote the third chapter of the blueprint. When hard money triples against government money, collapse follows. The empire falls, and the people pay. Next, the blueprint crossed oceans again, to an empire that ruled the world, commanded the seas, and believed it could never lose. Until one quiet weekend, it did. It was called the empire on which the sun never set. But by 1949, that sun was flickering. Britain had ruled global finance for over a century. Its currency, the pound sterling, was the gold-backed anchor of world trade. London was the heartbeat of money itself. And then war, debt, denial. The same three horsemen that have ended every empire in history. World War I forced Britain to abandon gold in 1914. It was supposed to be temporary. It never is. They printed to fund the war. Inflation ate through the working class. Then they tried to go back to gold in the 1920s. But confidence was gone. By World War II, the nation was victorious militarily, but bankrupt financially. It owed billions to its new creditor, the United States. At Bretton Woods, 1944, a new world order was drawn, and for the first time in centuries, it didn't revolve around the pound. The dollar took center stage, pegged to gold at $35 an ounce. The pound was tied to the dollar, clinging to status like a proud old monarch refusing to step down. But pride doesn't pay the bills. Throughout the late 1940s, Britain bled dollars. Imports soared. Exports lagged. Reserves evaporated. Everyone knew the pound was overvalued. Everyone except the government pretending it wasn't. Then came the weekend, September 18, 1949. In one shocking announcement, the British government admitted defeat. The pound was devalued by 30.5% overnight. It dropped from $4.03 to $2.8. A single sentence ended centuries of financial dominance. Gold didn't rise. The pound collapsed. And with it, the illusion that Britain still ruled the monetary world. That's how fast it happens. Not in riots, not in revolutions, but in a single weekend when the truth can no longer be denied. Historians call it a necessary adjustment, but to the people living it, it was a shockwave. Prices jumped. Savings lost a third of their value. Confidence vanished. And from that point forward, the pound would never again be the world's anchor. Sound familiar? Fast forward 76 years. The U.S. Dollar now sits where the pound once did, the world's reserve currency, respected, overvalued, and quietly rotting from within. Foreign governments are no longer hoarding it, they're diversifying away. The dollar's share of global reserves has slipped from 73% in 2000 to barely 58% in 2025. The same slow leak Britain faced, just on a bigger stage. Psychologists call it anchoring bias, the refusal to accept a new reality because the old one feels safer. That's what kept the British clinging to an overvalued pound. It's what keeps Americans today saying, the dollar will always be king. But the market doesn't care about pride. It only cares about trust. And when that trust breaks, the fall is sudden. Not gradual, not gentle, just one weekend. And everything changes. Because the blueprint has reached its final chapter. Rome taught it. Spain confirmed it. China repeated it. Britain sealed it. And now America is next in line. August 15, 1971, President Richard Nixon appeared on national television and did something no leader had ever dared. He killed the last tie between money and gold. With one speech, the world's financial contract was ripped apart. Foreign nations could no longer exchange their dollars for gold. The United States, the global anchor of trust, went full fiat. And for the first time in human history, every currency on earth was backed by nothing but faith. At first, it worked. The 1980s brought a boom. The 1990s brought the internet. People called it the American century. But what nobody noticed was that the same blueprint Rome wrote 2,000 years ago was quietly loading in the background, where spending, debt expansion, and the seduction of free money. The pattern never changed. Only the language did. Instead of silver coins, we had treasury bonds. Instead of royal decrees, we had Federal Reserve minutes. Instead of emperors, we had economists in designer suits promising soft landings. But math doesn't care about press conferences. By 2008, the machine broke. Trillions were printed overnight to save the system. And that's when the addiction started. Every crisis since has required more printing, faster. 2020 was the overdose, $6 trillion in 1 year, as if prosperity could be coded into existence. And now, in 2025, the withdrawal has begun. Interest rates at 5.25%, mortgage rates above 7%, credit card debt at a record $1.4 trillion, national debt blowing past $37.4 trillion, growing faster than the GDP itself. Even worse, interest payments on that debt are expected to exceed $1.2 trillion this year, more than the entire U.S. defense budget. Let that sink in. America spends more to pay its debt than to defend itself. That's not sustainable. That's stage 6 of the blueprint, loss of confidence. But people don't feel it in charts. They feel it in their kitchens. Meet Tom and Lisa, a couple from Ohio. They lost their home in 2008, rebuilt, and finally bought again in 2021. Then mortgage rates doubled. Their payments exploded. Now, they're watching their dream house turn into another foreclosure waiting to happen. They thought crypto was their way out, digital gold, they said. But by 2024, 70% of their savings had vanished in the market's latest rug pull. Different tools, same trap. This is normalcy bias in real time, the instinct to believe that tomorrow will be fine because yesterday was fine. But that's exactly how empires collapse quietly. Not with tanks in the streets, but with citizens too tired to notice their money evaporating. Meanwhile, the insiders, the ones who actually understand the playbook, are already moving. Central banks bought over 1,200 tons of gold in 2023 alone, the largest accumulation in half a century. Nations are repatriating their reserves, taking physical gold home. They know the clock has started. And for ordinary Americans, they're being herded into the next illusion: digital money, surveillance finance, programmable credit. The same freedom wrapped in a shinier app. Rome called it denarius. Spain called it vel-en. Britain called it sterling. We call it the dollar. Different name, same ending. The signal's flashing again. Gold has doubled. The countdown has begun. and history doesn't grant second chances. Here's the truth no one on Wall Street will tell you. When empires die, money doesn't vanish, it moves. It flows upward, quietly, from the unaware to the prepared. And that transfer has already begun. You can see it in the numbers. Since 2022, global central banks have been buying gold faster than at any time since World War II. Over 1,200 tons added in 2023 alone, led by countries like China, Turkey, and Poland. Even the Federal Reserve has quietly repatriated parts of its gold reserves, bringing them back to U.S. soil. They're not buying crypto. They're not buying memes. They're buying what has outlived every empire before them: gold, silver, land, and energy. And what are everyday Americans buying? Credit. Cars they can't afford. Houses financed at 7%. Stocks at record P/E ratios. Digital dreams that can disappear with one server crash. It's not their fault the system taught them to chase paper and pixels instead of permanence. That's loss aversion at work, the brain's refusal to take short-term pain for long-term security. We cling to the illusion because the truth feels heavier. But the wealthy think differently. They embrace discomfort now to avoid disaster later. Meet Elaine, 53, from Arizona. She did everything right. Worked 30 years. Saved in her 401k. Trusted the system. Then 2022 hit inflation, uncle bills, higher taxes. Her retirement account shrank 25% while living costs rose 20%. That's when she realized what no advisor ever told her. Her savings were denominated in a currency losing trust. So she changed her ritual. Every month, she converts 10% of her cash into what she can hold: physical gold, some silver, even a little productive land. Not to get rich, to stay free. That's what this is really about: freedom. Because when your wealth depends on their system, your freedom does too. And when that system starts to crack, only real assets, things you can touch, things that produce, things no algorithm can delete, can keep you grounded. History doesn't repeat perfectly, but it rhymes with eerie precision. Rome lost its trust in silver. Spain drowned in its own treasure. China printed itself to death. Britain blinked in one weekend. And America, the empire of credit, is now writing the final verse. But collapse doesn't have to mean catastrophe. For those who understand the blueprint, it's opportunity. Empires fall, but wealth endures for the ones who adapt before the headlines. So ask yourself, if the dollar you hold today can buy half as much in 10 years, what will you trade it for now? Paper promises? Or something real, something eternal? Because the rule never fails. When gold doubles, empires die. And gold has doubled. You can't change the cycle, but you can choose your side of it. So, where are you watching from? What's your biggest financial fear right now? Comment below, let's talk about it. Because the collapse doesn't end the story. It just starts a new one. And it belongs to those who prepare.